The cast was broke, the network lied, and Henry Winkler was privy to everything. The largest show on ABC was concealing some unpleasant secrets, including allegations of sexual harassment from the first episode, characters living in poverty while executives benefited, and the acrimonious rivalry that nearly ended Ron Howard's career. Happy Days' true story will leave you stunned after 50 years. America was experiencing hardship in the 1970s. The Watergate affair and the Vietnam War had left people feeling angry. The 1950s were becoming increasingly nostalgic, and many people wished to go back in time. Gary Marshall saw this as the ideal moment for a familiar and cozy television program. He wanted a remembrance of the good old days, when families were tight and school dances were more important to youngsters than politics. In 1971, he tried this concept for the first time with a pilot called New Family in Town. In 1972, ABC chose to broadcast it as a part of their anthology series, Love, American Style, after networks rejected it. In syndication, the show was retitled Love and the Happy Days after it had previously been titled Love and the Happy Day. Although Marshall had faith in the show, it didn't immediately take off. He recognized the potential of a narrative about a Milwaukee teen who was all-American and his family in the 1950s. The production crew paid great attention to details to ensure that it felt genuine. Period-appropriate attire, jukeboxes, and vintage automobiles. It felt more like a stage play than a normal sitcom because of the intensity that a live studio audience brought. Happy Days was well received by viewers when it debuted in 1974. The program was healthy, humorous, and consoling when people most needed it. The series initially centered on Richie Cunningham. Ron Howard performed the role. Growing up in a tiny American town, he had to deal with his friends, family, and daily life as a clean-cut teenager. However, Marshall was able to adjust. With time, the show evolved. It veered more toward humor, and Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, one of the characters, immediately took center stage. Fonzie's motorcycle, leather jacket, and easy cool made him a cultural figure. His recognizable eye. And gave him the thumbs up, making him the show's face. American Graffiti would not have made any of this possible. George Lucas made a film in 1973 that embraced adolescence in California in the early 1960s. With a budget of about $777,000, The Unexpected Smash, starring Ron Howard, made almost $200 million. The popularity of stories about America in the middle of the 20th century was demonstrated. When ABC execs watched the success, they recognized that Marshall's pilot had a comparable quality. It gave them the impetus they needed to approve Happy Days. Happy Days was very different from other sitcoms when it debuted on January 15, 1974. In the 1950s, when drive-ins, jukeboxes, and leather jackets typified American society, it was a nostalgia trip. Due in large part to its memorable ensemble, the show became an immediate classic. Every performer contributed in some way, transforming a straightforward family sitcom into one of the most cherished television programs ever. Prior to playing Richie Cunningham, Ron Howard was already well known. Although he was well known to audiences as Opie from the Andy Griffith program, he desired to shed his child star persona by the time Happy Days arrived. He was ideal for the character of Richie. A decent child attempting to balance friendships, high school, and family life, he was the quintessential American teenager. In order to make his performance seem authentic, Howard studied old yearbooks and watched Father Knows Best and other vintage shows from the 1950s. Suddenly, in 1972, it began as a segment called Love and the Happy Days that focused on love in the American way. In that episode, Howard played Richie, which helped him get the part when ABC chose to make the concept a full-length series. The soul of the show was Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, but Richie was its heart. Not everyone first considered Henry Winkler for the part. When he auditioned in 1973, he was actually almost unknown, but his performance was noteworthy. He read more than simply the lines. His own was added, providing them in a serene manner. Prior to idly throwing his script into the air, his self-assurance helped him land the job. Fonzie was supposed to be a supporting character, but Winkler made him memorable. His most well-known moment was entirely improvised, checking his hair in the mirror without touching it. Winkler determined the Fonz wouldn't have to comb his hair as the script required. He only nodded in agreement, took a quick look in the mirror, and turned to leave. It turned to become one of the most recognizable motions in television history. The famous leather jacket nearly didn't happen. ABC officials were concerned that it gave him a criminal image, but the show's creator, Gary Marshall, resisted. The jacket was permitted in situations where Fonzie was close to his motorcycle, he persuaded them. That minor concession made all the difference. Fonzie became extremely popular by season 2. He became the spokesperson for Happy Days, making appearances on action figures, comic novels, and lunchboxes. Fonzie became one of the most well-known TV characters ever, and Winkler won 2 Golden Globes for his performance. Richie and his buddies were the main emphasis of the show, but it couldn't have succeeded without Richie's parents. Tom Bosley and Marion Ross, who portrayed Marion and Howard Cunningham, added humor and heart to each scene. It was an easy pick for Ross because she had already made an impression on producers during her appearance in the Love American-style pilot. However, Bosley came very close to not playing the role. After reading a heartwarming father-son sequence in the script, he initially declined, but then had second thoughts. Erin Moran, who portrayed Joni Cunningham, was just 13 years old at the beginning of Happy Days. She landed the role when Love American-style became a series since she had already starred in the pilot. Joni was initially just your average nosy little sister, but she developed into a strong, self-reliant young lady over time. Her bond with Fonzie turned into one of the most memorable aspects of the program. He referred to her lovingly as Shortcake, and he constantly looked out for her, treating her like a little sister. Anson Williams' own path to happiness was surprising. Richie's best pal Warren Potsy Weber was portrayed by him. In the rain on the day of his audition, his automobile broke down. He made a big impression despite being very wet and arriving late. He was cast in the part, and Potsy evolved into more than just Richie's companion. He was an endearing, occasionally naive, and gifted singer. Ralph Mal almost wasn't played by Don Most. Because he preferred serious acting over comedic acting, he initially declined the assignment. He was not going to be lost, Gary Marshall. In an attempt to persuade Most's agent to change his mind, he played basketball with him. Said in the affirmative, and Ralph Maff became a memorable character on the show. ABC debuted Happy Days as a mid-season replacement on January 15, 1974. Watchers were transported to the middle of the 1950s, when they followed Richie Cunningham. Performed by Ron Howard, who lived in Milwaukee. Tom Bosley's character, Howard, his father, had a hardware store. His mother Marion, who was portrayed by Marion Ross, was wise and kind and kept the family together. Joni, played by Erin Moran, is Richie's younger sister. Possessed a quick wit that frequently took him by surprise. His best buddies Ralph Maff and Potsy Weber, who were portrayed by Don Most and Anson Williams, respectively, provided a lot of amusement with their antics. Richie's experiences at home, school, and Arnold's malt business were the show's first focal points. Adolescence's purity was caught, but it also came at a time when America needed consolation. Audiences sought an escape as the nation struggled economically and with Watergate. Although critics had differing opinions, the humor and heart of the first season's 16 episodes resonated with viewers. Happy Days was the most popular show in America by the third season in 1976. Viewers adored its retro appeal, as evidenced by the skyrocketing ratings, which reached a 31.5 Nielsen score. The mood was greatly influenced by the music. Throughout the first season, rock was used often. By Bill Haley's remarks, which added a genuine 1950s vibe to the program. Afterwards, it changed to an original theme song, Happy Days, written by Norman Gimbel and composed by Charles Fox. However, nothing influenced the success of the sitcom more than Henry Winkler's character Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli. He began as a supporting character but quickly became a fan favorite thanks to his leather jacket and easy attitude. Fonzie eventually gained the same level of significance as Richie, if not more. The show's final episode aired on July 19, 1984, and it ran for 11 seasons. In addition to producing 255 episodes, it inspired popular spin-offs such as Mork and Mindy and Laverne and Shirley. Happy Days is still regarded as a cultural icon after many years. People still remember the simpler era with nostalgia, and it was more than just a play about the past. However, behind the scenes, things weren't always flawless. The goal of Happy Days, which debuted in 1974, was to depict the purity of 1950s adolescence. Its early episodes, however, provoked criticism decades later. After watching a repeat of the premiere episode all the way, a Canadian fan lodged a complaint, sparking one of the most heated discussions in 2022. CHCHDT. The program was criticized for its racially offensive and sexist language in a complaint submitted to the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council. Mary Lou Milligan and Richie Cunningham were in one of the most criticized sequences. Richie heeded his friend Potsy's advice on how to capitalize on her reputation, which was defined as such. He even attempted to take off her bra while reading her sultry passages. Scenes like those are now seen to be perpetuating negative stereotypes. When Mary Lou casually stated that her gym teacher had once attempted to take her sweater, it was another noteworthy occasion. The show made light of it rather than treat it as a serious problem. Richie and Potsy also joked in the episode that an Eskimo would win the presidency and use a snowball to launch the World Series. Even though the CBSC decided that the remark was about Alaska's climate and not Native Americans, it was nonetheless considered out of date and improper. Any content warning merely made the criticism stronger. The CBSC decided that there were no broadcasting codes broken by the episode in spite of these objections. The argument continued after they claimed that it accurately represented the era in which it was created. Some suggested that while old shows should continue to air, they should do so with disclaimers that provide context. Others thought that some shows, regardless of their historical significance, had no place on contemporary television. However, Happy Days was controversial due to its behind-the-scenes footage. The main character was supposed to be Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard. However, Henry Winkler's Arthur Fonzarelli, had taken center stage by the second season. Originally scheduled to make 7 appearances per season, Fonzie's fame altered the course of events. By the third season, ABC execs recognized a chance. They intended to capitalize on Winkler's popularity by renaming the program Fonzie's Happy Days. Howard felt enraged. He believed that he was being ignored, which was disrespectful to the other actors. Even though his contract was still in effect, he made it plain that he would think about leaving if they carried out their plan. He even considered returning to film school and giving up television altogether at one time. The question of whether Howard felt like a second-class citizen on his own show was posed by reporters, which only made matters worse. The pressure was increased by the media attention, but through it all, Winkler and he remained close. After seeing what was going on, Winkler defended Howard and advocated for more equitable screen time. Ultimately, the producers chose not to change the show's name. The success of Happy Days persisted as they made an effort to keep the whole cast interested. The tensions, however, had not yet subsided. Don Most, Aaron Moran, Marion Ross, Anson Williams, and the estate of Tom Bosley were among the 5 Happy Days cast members that sued CBS in 2011 for $10 million. They asserted that the network owed them money for products that featured their photos. Lunchboxes, trade cards, DVDs, and even slot machines were featured in this. Their contracts guaranteed them 2.5% of the net profits for group appearances and 5% of the net proceeds for goods that featured them individually. CBS countered that the actors were only owed modest sums, ranging from $8,500 to $9,000 each, primarily from the money made from slot machines. When the cast noticed Happy Days-themed slot machines in casinos in 2008, the problem was revealed. Supporters thought they were profiting from them. But they weren't. Marion Ross was particularly irritated when people applauded her, believing that she was taking advantage of her position. When the cast questioned CBS about the money, the network acknowledged that they owed money, but denied withholding millions. The performers chose to file a lawsuit after their attempts at mediation failed. Because it involved more than just good times, the case was significant. The way that studios manage merchandising royalty was called into question. Without knowing how their pictures may be utilized in the future, many performers signed contracts. The case was resolved in 2012. In exchange for CBS honoring the future merchandise agreement, each actor earned $65,000. Although it fell well short of their desired $10 million, it established a significant precedent for other actors in like circumstances. The majority of the cast had trouble receiving proper compensation, but Fonzie's actor, Henry Winkler, was in a completely different position. The show's biggest star had secured a separate contract that guaranteed him revenues from products that featured his image. There was tension as a result. One of the actors, Winkler, had been getting money for years, while the others had to battle for anything at all, according to Don Most, who later referred to it as unfair. Winkler was not, however, involved in the action. It would have been more difficult if he had joined the action because he had already been compensated under other terms. Winkler and his co-stars' disparity in wealth extended beyond products. According to reports, he accepted a reduced base pay throughout the show's run in return for a cut of the back-end earnings. That choice repaid. Happy Days continued to be successful in syndication, and the money continued to flow in. His co-stars weren't as fortunate. Serious financial difficulties were experienced by some, and some never received residual payments. Even Aaron Moran's house was foreclosed upon. Despite Happy Days' enormous success, not all of its outcomes were as good as anticipated. A number of spin-offs were inspired by the show, some of them quickly faded away, while others became hits. From 1982 to 1983, Joni Loves Chachi was one of the biggest disasters. It trailed after Joni Cunningham and Chachi Arcola while pursuing their musical aspirations in Chicago. The network had great expectations because Happy Days had focused heavily on their romance. Despite extensive promotion, viewers failed to relate to the show. Critics thought it didn't provide anything new and instead leaned too heavily on nostalgia. During its second season, the show's ratings declined and it was discontinued. The same was true for other spin-offs. Out of the Blue and Blansky's beauties seemed hurried and fell short of capturing the spirit of Happy Days. Mork, Mindy, and Shirley had issues. They had a great start, but they lost steam due to changing artistic directions and behind-the-scenes disputes. Instead of seeing these spin-offs as significant expansions of Happy Days' universe, fans eventually began to perceive them as attempts to capitalize on the show's success. Then the moment that made all the difference arrived. Hollywood, Part 3, an episode of Happy Days that aired on September 20, 1977, included a moment that would become a TV classic. Henry Winkler's character Fonzie, still wearing his leather jacket, hopped on a set of water skis and leaped over a shark. It was intended to be a spectacular stunt that showcased Winkler's actual water skiing abilities. Rather, it came to represent a production that was going awry. Happy Days continued for 6 more seasons, but after that episode, something felt different. The program shifted its focus from realistic narrative to wildly dramatic tales that emphasized Fonzie's legendary character. Eventually, any TV program that took an absurd turn to remain current was referred to as jumping the shark. Later, the episode's writer, Fred Fox Jr., justified it. He thought it suited the audience's expectations at the time and Fonzie's character. He wasn't entirely wrong. For many viewers, that was the start of the show's downfall, even though Fonzie was always a fearless and adventurous figure. Whether it actually damaged Happy Days or only contributed to its mythology, it is still one of the most talked about scenes in TV history. The charm of Happy Days was beginning to fade by the early 1980s. It had been one of the most watched television programs for years, drawing millions of viewers each Tuesday at 8 p.m. As the decade progressed, however, audiences were evolving. Stories of the 1950s were no longer as popular. What they desired was something fresh. The issue wasn't only that change in preference. ABC made a choice that negatively impacted the show's popularity. They rescheduled Happy Days to 8:30 p.m. for the 1982-83 season to create space for upcoming programming. That may not sound like much, but it meant that the show suddenly had to contend with NBC's A-Team. That series had a fast-paced plot, lots of action, and explosions. It became popular very fast and drew many spectators. By the following season, 1983 to 1984, the show's Nielsen rating had fallen to 63, the lowest it had ever been. Things got worse as important characters were lost. In 1980, Ron Howard, who portrayed Richie Cunningham, departed after season 7 to concentrate on his directing career. Around the same time, Ralph Maff's actor, Donnie Most, also departed. These losses were significant. The show had revolved around Richie. Ralph injected energy and fun. Happy Days felt different in their absence. Even with the addition of new characters, the magic was never fully captured. Fans of the show remained devoted despite these difficulties. Even while it wasn't drawing in as many viewers as it used to, the characters were still popular. ABC wanted to do it right when they decided it was time to discontinue the series because of this. Passages, a special show that concluded significant storylines and provided longtime fans with the necessary closure, was broadcast on May 8, 1984. The wedding of Chachi Arcola and Joni Cunningham was the most significant event. In the later seasons, their romance had played a significant role, even inspiring a brief spin-off named Chachi is Adored by Joni. Their journey came to a perfect conclusion when they were married. Following Fonzie's attempt to adopt Danny, a young orphan, was another poignant plot point. It was not simple. The legal system obstructed his path, indicating that adopting a kid as a single guy would be difficult. But Howard Cunningham helped Fonzie win the lawsuit. This revealed another side of him, after years of being the cool renegade. He was prepared to have a child. The episode's most memorable moment occurred close to the finish. The actor who played Howard Cunningham, Tom Bosley, faced the camera and addressed the crowd directly. Although it felt appropriate, this was something the show had never done before. He lifted a glass. Expressed gratitude to the audience for joining the Happy Days family. The last lines of Happy Days were then spoken by him. The farewell was ideal after 11 years. It turns out that Passages wasn't the final episode to air. ABC aired 5 additional episodes following the conclusion due to scheduling difficulties brought on by the Winter Olympics in 1984. The majority of viewers do not view them as part of the actual ending because they were not intended to be a part of the show's termination. The true farewell for them was Passages. Happy Days was very different from other sitcoms when it debuted on January 15, 1974. A trip back in time, the 1950s seemed to come alive once more. It was set in Milwaukee and followed Richie Cunningham, his family, and his friends as they dealt with adolescence, family values, and the pleasures and challenges of maturing. One of ABC's biggest blockbusters, the show ran for 11 seasons until May 8, 1984. In addition to being well-liked, it had unexpected effects on American pop culture. A character who wasn't even meant to be significant was one of the main factors contributing to its popularity. Initially a supporting role, Henry Winkler's character Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli soon took center stage. Fonzie's slicked-back hair, leather jacket, and easy attitude made him the face of Happy Days. His mantra, "I," was unavoidable. Before long, he was more than a character. A pop cultural icon, he was. Additionally, Fonzie gave the world something surprising. He tried a crazy stunt, jumping over a shark while water skiing in a September 1977 episode of Season 5. Although it was supposed to be an exciting moment at the time, years later, people's perceptions changed. It became known as jumping the shark. Today, it's used to characterize when a television program loses its appeal. However, Happy Days was about more than one character. A whole world was formed by it. Some of the most popular television spin-offs were born out of the show. Happy Days introduced 2 factory workers, who were followed in Laverne and Shirley, 1976 to 1983. The 1978 to 1982 television series Mork and Mindy introduced viewers to a young Robin Williams in an odd but memorable Happy Day episode. The legacy of Joni Loves Chachi, which aired from 1982 to 1983, was further enhanced. Happy Days meant more to its cast than a job. It was the beginning of important careers. Actor Ron Howard, who portrayed Richie Cunningham, gave up acting to become a highly regarded director in Hollywood. Afterwards, A Beautiful Mind won an Oscar. Henry Winkler achieved fame as an actor and producer after years of being stereotyped as Fonzie. He received his first Emmy in 2018 for his performance in Barry on HBO. The rest of the cast secured stable jobs in movies and television, demonstrating Happy Days' versatility as a sitcom. It served as a launchpad. The show came at just the right moment. Political scandals and economic hardships abound in the 1970s. People in America needed something reassuring because things were changing quickly. That was from Happy Days. Family dinners were used to resolve conflicts in this reimagining of the 1950s. There was always a straightforward solution to any problem, and friendships lasted forever. It proved that audiences would always enjoy stories about growing up, friendship, and family since that formula worked so well that it impacted subsequent shows. Even though critics' opinions were divided, the show continued to get praise and honors. During its initial run, Henry Winkler never won an Emmy, but it earned numerous nominations. Ron Howard and Winkler shared the 1978 Golden Globes for Best Actor in a Television Series. Over the years, Happy Days had 21 nominations and more than 18 wins from different award ceremonies. Later, TV Guide named it one of the top 50 shows ever. In 2004, Tom Bosley, who portrayed Howard Cunningham, was recognized as one of the best fathers on television.